In the blood-soaked pages of American frontier history, one name echoes with both dread and fascination: Sam Bass. To some, he was a devil in boots. To others, a bold rebel who laughed in the face of authority. But whatever you believe, there's no denying the impact this man had on the mythos of the Wild West. He was no ordinary outlaw. Sam Bass didn't just rob trains, he robbed time itself, seizing his moment in history with reckless courage, and leaving behind a trail of stolen gold, broken laws, and immortal legend. The mere mention of his name once sent chills through Texas lawmen, freight conductors, and bank tellers. This was the man who turned quiet stations into battlegrounds, and who, with a revolver and a wry smile, made the U.S. government chase its own tail. He was elusive, fast, daring, and dangerously charming. But who was the man behind the legend? What pushed a boy from Indiana down the dark and dusty road to infamy? Our journey begins in the year 1851, in the humble town of Mitchell, Indiana, nestled among rolling farmlands and whispering trees. It was here that Sam Bass entered the world, completely unaware of the legacy he would carve with gunpowder and grit. His life began quietly, the son of Daniel and Elizabeth Jane Bass, a multiracial family with deep roots in North Carolina. But fate did not offer him a gentle start. By the time Sam was barely a teenager, both of his parents had died, leaving him orphaned and vulnerable. The world, as if to prepare him for the hard life ahead, struck early and struck cruelly. Sam went to live with an uncle who did his best to raise the boy, but no amount of shelter or sermons could tame the fire growing inside the young Bass. Something inside him longed for more than cornfields and chores. He wasn't just dreaming of adventure. He needed it. At just 19 years old, Sam Bass made a decision that would alter his destiny. He ran away from home, not with a map, not with a plan, but with the raw, unquenchable thirst to see what the world had hidden beyond the horizon. The East had nothing left for him. The West, however, the West was alive, lawless, free. He drifted like tumbleweed through Mississippi, working briefly at a sawmill in Rosedale. But the work was backbreaking, and the pay barely kept a man fed. Bass wasn't built for labor. He was built for luck, speed, and nerve. So he followed the setting sun to Texas, where open plains stretched out like blank pages, waiting to be written in bullet holes and boot prints. There, he took a job under Sheriff Egan of Denton, but the badge didn't suit him, not yet. Bass wanted the thrill, not the rules. He found it in horses. He bought one and started racing, soon turning a profit. For a while he lived like a local legend, riding hard and gambling harder, drifting between ranch jobs and card tables. But fate, once again, had darker plans. In 1876, Bass and a group of cowboy companions drove cattle north to Nebraska, intending to make money and maybe settle into something steady. But money slipped through their fingers like sand in a storm. In Deadwood, South Dakota, a lawless boomtown of gold, guns, and gamblers, Bass lost it all at the tables. Broke and bitter, he looked at the world and saw not opportunity, but enemies to take from. This was the moment when Sam Bass stopped being a man and became an outlaw. It began with small crimes. Bass partnered with Joel Collins, and together they formed the Black Hills Bandits, a ragtag crew of misfits who robbed stagecoaches across the Dakotas. The money wasn't much, but the taste of danger was intoxicating. Bass was hooked. He wasn't interested in scraping by. He wanted the big score, the one job that would turn his name into a whisper across the plains. That moment was coming, and it would make Sam Bass the most wanted man in the West. There are men who are born to follow rules. Sam Bass was not one of them. After leaving home behind, the young drifter carried with him nothing but grit, a restless spirit, and the wide-eyed ambition of someone who believed the world owed him more than plows and calluses. His first destination was Rosedale, Mississippi, where he found work at a sawmill. The days were long, the pay barely enough to afford a warm meal, and the air thick with dust and desperation. He chopped, hauled, and sweated through the seasons. But for Sam Bass, labor without reward was a kind of slow death. The sawmill taught him a truth he would carry into his outlaw days. A man could break his back and still die poor. So he left. Again. This time, westward. The land was calling. The vast open plains of Texas, still untamed, still brimming with stories waiting to be carved in gunpowder and grit. Bass arrived in Denton, a rough-edged town nestled in the North Texas prairie. He picked up work with Sheriff W.F. Egan, wrangling cattle, fixing fences and chasing strays. Sam took to the job with quiet resolve, but it wasn't long before the same itch returned. This wasn't the life he wanted. He didn't crave structure or orders. What he craved was the thrill of uncertainty, the kind that flickers just before a gun is drawn or a horse makes its final lunge toward the finish line. And it was a horse that changed everything. After scraping together his wages, Sam Bass bought a modest steed, not the fastest, not the strongest, but spirited. That spirit matched his own, and soon the pair became inseparable. In those early Texas days, Sam Bass became a gambler, a horse racer, and a man chasing fast fortunes. He raced in dusty arenas outside of Denton and San Antonio, betting not just his money but his future. To his surprise, the horse kept winning. He gained a reputation, not just for racing, but for always managing to walk away with more than he arrived with. Some called it luck, others whispered about cheating, but Bass didn't care what they thought. He was surviving, he was earning. And for the first time, he wasn't under anyone's thumb. Still, survival was never enough for Sam Bass. In 1876, with the southern heat clinging to his collar and a burning hunger for something bigger, Bass teamed up with a few fellow cowboys, Joel Collins, chief among them, and joined a cattle drive to Nebraska. Their goal was simple: herd the livestock, sell them for a decent profit, and maybe, just maybe, turn that into a new start. They drove the herd for weeks, enduring sunstroke, bandits, and stampedes. When they finally arrived in Omaha, they sold the cattle and pocketed a respectable sum. And then, they headed north to Deadwood. If there was one place in the West that could devour a man a soul faster than the desert, it was Deadwood. A mining town born in the chaos of the Black Hills gold rush, it thrived on greed, violence, and the kind of sin that walked boldly in broad daylight. Streets filled with prospectors, gamblers, thieves, prostitutes, and killers. Sam Bass stepped into this den of vice with a full purse and an empty conscience. It didn't take long to lose it all. The poker tables in Deadwood weren't like the ones in Denton. They were full of seasoned sharps and conmen, men who smiled as they stripped you clean. Sam and Collins gambled hard, and by the time the week was over, every cent from the cattle drive was gone. No savings, no investments, just the sharp sting of regret and a thirst for vengeance, not against the men who beat them, but against the system itself. Bass looked around and realized something. Every man in Deadwood was stealing something. Some did it with cards, others did it with guns. And the ones getting rich weren't the ones working the hardest. They were the ones taking what they wanted. And so, Sam Bass decided to take. Teaming up again with Joel Collins, and soon joined by outlaws like Jack Davis, Jim Berry, and Bill Heffridge, they formed what would come to be known as the Black Hills Bandits, a ragged group of former ranch hands and gamblers who had nothing left to lose. They started small robbing stagecoaches, intercepting shipments and ambushing travelers across the Dakota Territory. They didn't make much in those first weeks. A few dollars, some supplies, a pocket watch here, a silver ring there. But the money wasn't the point anymore. It was the freedom, the thrill of outwitting the law, of staring down danger and surviving. For Sam, every successful heist felt like a piece of his identity being reclaimed. He wasn't just another broke cowboy anymore. He was building a legend. The gang's operations spread quickly across the Black Hills. Law enforcement, still thin and scattered in the region, struggled to track them. Meanwhile, Bass and his crew moved like ghosts, quick, ruthless, and unpredictable. They developed tactics, scouting parties, disguises, misdirection. And through it all, Sam Bass rose quietly as the unofficial leader. He didn't bark orders. He didn't need to. His resolve, his daring, and his refusal to betray his own earned him loyalty. But Sam wasn't satisfied with small-time raids. He wanted a heist that would shock the nation, something big enough to give him not just wealth, but immortality. That opportunity came in the fall of 1877. The Black Hills Bandits left Deadwood and made their way to Big Springs, Nebraska, a quiet outpost along the Union Pacific Railroad. They had inside information, A train was due to arrive carrying passengers, cargo, and most importantly, a shipment of gold. On the night of the robbery, 6 masked men waited in the shadows, pistols drawn and nerves like coiled snakes. As the train hissed to a stop, they boarded it like phantoms. They cornered the express messenger and demanded access to the safe. The man, terrified, claimed it had a time lock and couldn't be opened until the train reached its final destination. Tension rippled through the air. One of the bandits, suspecting a lie, noticed 3 small crates tucked beside the safe. He smashed one open with a cold pickaxe, and inside, it gleamed like destiny, $20,000 in solid gold coins. Each crate held the same. By the time they finished looting the train, the gang had stolen nearly $60,000 in gold, the equivalent of over $1 million today. It was one of the greatest train robberies in American history. The nation was stunned. Newspapers called it a disgrace. The government called it a declaration of war. And the name Sam Bass was now etched into the minds of every sheriff, every bounty hunter, every deputy U.S. Marshal from Texas to Wyoming. Bass had done it. He had crossed the line from drifter to outlaw, from gambler to ghost. But the storm was coming. Because in the Wild West, the bigger the legend, the faster the bullets. By the fall of 1877, Sam Bass was no longer just a cowboy with a fast horse and a gambler's smile. He was a man marked by the road, hardened by failure, and driven by a hunger that would never be satisfied by the clinking of a few silver coins. He wanted more. Not just money, but meaning, infamy, fear, legacy. And in a time when legends were born through the barrel of a gun and the weight of gold, Bass and his gang set their eyes on a target that would cement them in history forever. The Union Pacific Railroad, lifeline of the American frontier, was a vein of steel that pumped progress into the West. And on a quiet stretch near Big Springs, Nebraska, it was about to be cracked open by 6 desperados armed with pistols, nerve, and nothing to lose. The plan was simple. Sam Bass, Joel Collins, Jack Davis, Jim Berry, Bill Heffridge, and Tom Nixon, the infamous Black Hills Bandits, had drifted south from Deadwood with a tip. A train carrying passengers, mail, and a mysterious express shipment was scheduled to stop at Big Springs late one evening. The town was small, sleepy, and sparsely guarded. Perfect. The night air was cold. Crickets chirped in rhythm with distant hoofbeats as the bandits lay in wait, hidden beneath the cloak of prairie darkness. The steel rails hummed. A whistle blew like a ghost howling through the plains. The train was coming, and then it stopped. What followed next unfolded in minutes, but echoed for decades. The gang boarded the train with pistols drawn and bandanas pulled tight, moving with the precision of wolves circling their prey. No shots were fired at first. No one resisted. Bass and his crew moved quickly through the passenger cars, disarming men, collecting watches, wallets, and jewelry with a mix of force and southern courtesy. Some said Bass would tip his hat after robbing you. Others said he cracked jokes, trying to calm nerves while emptying pockets. He was charming and cold-blooded, a contradiction wrapped in spurs. But the real prize lay in the express car, where one lone messenger stood guard over a safe that refused to open. He told the bandits it was secured with a time lock, impossible to breach until the final destination. Collins, angry, threatened to shoot the man. Tension built. Bass, ever the diplomat in a den of devils, told the gang to hold fire. He believed the messenger was telling the truth. Then one of the men noticed something. Near the large safe were 3 unmarked wooden crates, seemingly forgotten cargo. Curious and desperate for a win, one outlaw grabbed a cold pickaxe and split the top off a crate with a heavy swing. Inside, the air shifted. The gold didn't shine at first, it glowed. Stacked neatly inside the box were $20 gold pieces, shimmering like sunlight trapped in metal. The bandit gasped. The second crate, more of the same. The third, identical. 3 crates, $20,000 each. In the space of seconds, the Black Hills Bandits had stumbled upon $60,000 in gold coin, a sum so large it would rattle the nation to its knees. For comparison, a sheriff might make $200 a year. A bank might hold $10,000 on a busy day. This was a king's ransom, and it had fallen into the hands of 6 outlaws in the middle of nowhere. They loaded the loot with shaking hands and hearts beating like war drums. Every man understood. This was no longer just a robbery. It was a defining moment, a line drawn in blood and brass between legends and corpses. With the gold secured, they vanished into the prairie night, like whispers on the wind. News of the Big Springs robbery traveled fast, too fast. Within 24 hours, it was front-page news across the country. Headlines screamed of the greatest train robbery in U.S. history. The Union Pacific offered massive rewards. The U.S. Marshal's Office dispatched every available man. Local sheriffs called in militias. The hunt for Sam Bass had begun. The gang fled in different directions, hoping to avoid immediate capture. Bass and Berry rode south toward Texas, while Collins and others tried to head west. But it didn't take long for the law to catch up. On September 19, 1877, just days after the robbery, Joel Collins was gunned down near Buffalo Station in Kansas by lawmen who caught wind of his trail. Jack Davis was captured soon after, and Jim Berry, trying to quietly spend some of his share of the gold in Mexico, was tracked, cornered, and shot. He died clutching coin-stained saddlebags, his blood mixing with the fortune he helped steal. But Sam Bass, he was different. He melted into the wild like he'd been born from it. Changing horses, trading names, slipping through dusty towns like a spirit too stubborn to be caught. By the time the authorities realized who they were really dealing with, Bass had already returned to Texas, where a new legend was beginning to form, one that would involve even more robberies, betrayal, ambush, and one final, thunderous showdown. Yet even among all the chaos and the crimes that would follow, the Big Springs heist remained Bass's crown jewel. It was bold, it was bloody, it was historic, and it changed everything. It was a turning point, not just for Bass, but for the American West itself. Trains would never again be seen as safe, robbery would never again be dismissed as petty crime, and Sam Bass would never again be viewed as just a small-time outlaw. From that night on, he was public enemy one, a walking target with a bounty on his head and a price no jail could pay. And though he would steal again, and kill, and ride with fury unmatched by any man of his time, nothing would ever rival the gold-stained night in Big Springs, where a cowboy became a legend, and a legend became something more. The prairie night after the Big Springs train robbery hung heavy with silence, broken only by the pounding hooves of 6 men who had just pulled off the most infamous heist in U.S. railroad history. The gold was real, the law was furious, and Sam Bass was now more than an outlaw. He was a living myth vanishing into the darkness with fortune on his saddle and the law hot on his trail. Following the heist, the gang knew they couldn't stick together. Not for long. Every lawman between Nebraska and Texas had been alerted. Posters bearing crude sketches of their faces started appearing in saloons and train depots. The Black Hills Bandits were no longer a ghost story. They were a priority target. Ogallala, Nebraska was where they chose to disappear. A dusty, weather-worn outpost town far from the loud cries of the press, it became their brief sanctuary. There they found an unlikely ally, a man named Moore, a store employee who used to be a courier for the Union Pacific Railroad. He knew the schedules, the guards, the whispers, and more importantly, he knew how to keep a secret for a price. The gang played a clever game. They didn't arrive like criminals, they arrived like concerned citizens. Moore, possibly knowing more than he admitted, engaged with them as though they were ordinary men. The bandits, cool and composed, pretended to be interested in helping law enforcement track the real criminals. They offered vague information, asked probing questions about the investigation, and carefully gauged the local temperature. It worked. The law looked elsewhere, chasing shadows. Moore provided food, horses, and tips on safe passage. The gang evaded capture, and with each passing day, their boldness grew. Ogallala became a temporary base of operations from which Bass and the others continued their spree, robbing travelers and carriages in nearby towns, always just far enough from the last crime scene to remain invisible. But Sam Bass was not a man built to lie low for long. The freedom of the open trail tugged at his soul like a wild horse. He could still smell Texas in his memory, the hot winds, the card tables, the wide stretches of land where a man could disappear into the horizon. And so, with the blood of Kansas lawmen on his heels, and a fortune scattered among saddlebags and sympathizers, Sam Bass headed back to Texas. By early 1878, Bass had returned to familiar ground and quickly resumed his old ways, but this time he wasn't riding with the same band of outlaws. The gold from Big Springs had come at a cost. Most of his original gang were dead, arrested, or scattered like dust in the wind. So Bass did what he did best. He adapted. He began assembling a new gang, recruiting sharp-eyed cowboys, frustrated farmhands, and desperate gunslingers who had little to lose and much to gain. Men like Henry Underwood, Seaborn Barnes, and later, the doomed Jim Murphy. Together, they formed a new outfit just as fearless as the last, and once again the railroads would bleed. Between February and April of 1878, Bass's new gang carried out a series of train robberies around Dallas, each one bolder than the last. They struck with such speed and precision that local sheriffs began to believe they were dealing with multiple gangs. One moment, a train near Mesquite was looted of its mailbags and cash shipment. Days later, another rail car outside of Allen was stopped, its conductor held at gunpoint while passengers trembled in their seats. Then, in March, they hit again, this time outside Hutchins, stealing several $100s and weapons from an unsuspecting shipment. Their final robbery in that string came near Eagle Ford, a mere 20 miles from Dallas. Though the haul was smaller, the message was clear. No train in North Texas was safe. But something was different now. The golden glow of Big Springs was gone. These heists weren't bringing in riches. Most of the loot barely covered ammunition and supplies. The targets were smaller, more erratic, the rewards meager compared to what Bass had once held in his hands. And yet they robbed anyway. Not for wealth, but for momentum, for the thrill, for the legend, and legends attract attention. Word of the Texas train bandit reached the desks of two formidable forces, the Pinkerton National Detective Agency and the Texas Rangers. The Pinkertons, known for their cold efficiency and dogged pursuit of outlaws across state lines, had files and informants at the ready. But it was the Rangers, led by the resolute Captain Junius June Peak, who would take up the hunt with a fire born of personal pride and territorial justice. Peak wasn't chasing Bass because it was his job. He was chasing him because Bass had become an insult to the very idea of law in Texas. Every robbery was a slap in the face to lawmen who had sworn to protect the railroads and the people. And so, the Rangers prepared. They studied Bass's tactics. They monitored local stables. They infiltrated saloons and tapped informants. And slowly, they began to unravel the threads of Sam Bass's world. But Bass was slippery, and he always seemed to be one gallop ahead. Yet even the best outlaw can't outrun betrayal. Among Bass's newer recruits was Jim Murphy, a young man with a sharp eye, a fast draw, and a secret weakness: his father. When Murphy's father fell gravely ill and was detained by the authorities, the Rangers played a cruel but effective hand. They refused medical treatment unless Jim cooperated, and Jim broke. He agreed to spy on Sam Bass to feed information directly to the Rangers in exchange for leniency and his father's life. It was the first crack in the gang's armor, and it would prove fatal. Murphy stayed close, pretending to be loyal, while documenting Bass's movements, his plans, his hideouts. The noose was tightening. Bass, ever confident, never suspected the young traitor in his midst. By late spring, the Rangers had everything they needed. As Sam Bass prepared for one final ambitious robbery in Round Rock, he believed he was still the shadow, still the storm rolling silently across the prairie. But what he didn't know was that his name had become a beacon, and the eyes of Texas were all upon him. The next chapter would not be another escape. It would be a showdown, a trap, a final ride where bullets would write the last lines of a story already too wild to be real. Loyalty is the last coin an outlaw spends. For Sam Bass, that currency was about to run dry, spent not at the end of a gun, but by the slow bleed of betrayal. In early 1878, with the Texas Rangers closing in, Bass's once loyal crew began to crack. The robberies had become smaller, the risk larger, the law smarter. The gang needed to lay low, strike big again, and vanish. But behind Sam's back, the threads were already unraveling. One of Bass's most trusted new members was a young man named Jim Murphy. He was sharp, quiet, capable with a gun, and seemingly loyal. But Jim carried a weakness far more dangerous than bullets: his father. Murphy's father, Henry Murphy, had been arrested during the ongoing investigation into Bass's activities. The law, knowing full well how to press a man without lifting a finger, denied the elder Murphy access to medical care while in custody. It wasn't cruelty, it was calculated leverage. Jim was desperate. With his father's life on the line and rangers whispering promises of safety and forgiveness in his ear, Jim Murphy broke. He agreed to turn informant, and with that decision, the fate of Sam Bass was sealed. Jim Murphy's betrayal was slow poison. He didn't flee. He didn't shout warnings. Instead, he stayed right by Bass's side, eating with him, riding with him, planning with him, while secretly funneling every move back to Captain Junius Peak and Major John B. Jones of the Texas Rangers. Using coded letters and rendezvous with undercover agents, Murphy revealed the gang's plans piece by piece. The Rangers learned of their hideouts, their shifting movements, and most critically their next target, the Williamson County Bank in Round Rock, Texas. It was meant to be another fast score. The gang planned to ride into town, assess the area, and strike the next day. But instead they were galloping straight into a trap. July 19, 1878, Round Rock, Texas. The heat of the Texas summer clung to every wall, every rooftop, every saddle. Bass and three of his men, Seaborn Barnes, Frank Jackson, and Murphy, entered the small town under the pretense of buying supplies. They tied up their horses near Kopfer's store, just down the road from the bank. The men were relaxed, laughing. Bass bought cigars. Barnes picked up chewing tobacco. None of them knew that Ranger George Herold and Deputy Sheriff A.W. Grimes had been tipped off and were lying in wait. Murphy stayed behind, stalling just as instructed. As the gang stood outside the store, casual as any cowboys in town, Sheriff Grimes approached. Whether he recognized Bass immediately or simply acted on suspicion is unclear. What is certain is this: he never had the chance to finish his sentence. In a blur of movement and gunpowder, the street erupted into violence. Barnes, quicker on the draw, raised his pistol and shot Grimes through the throat, killing him instantly. The sound of the gunshot shattered the quiet heat, and chaos followed. George Herold, perched nearby, returned fire. Sergeant Richard Ware, another ranger, flanked the street and opened up with deadly precision. And in the middle of it all stood Sam Bass, drawing his revolver, firing wildly, yelling for his men to retreat. But the ambush was too fast, too coordinated. As bullets flew, Bass was hit, once in the hand, again in the chest, and then the final shot, a searing round that tore through his lower back and into his kidney. He staggered, dropped to one knee. Blood filled his mouth. But somehow he didn't fall. Frank Jackson, the youngest of the group, acted with a loyalty that legends are made of. As bullets hailed around them, Jackson galloped his horse straight into the line of fire, dismounted, and hoisted the dying Bass onto the saddle. With one hand firing a pistol and the other gripping the reins, he rode them both out of Round Rock. A storm of dust followed in their wake as the town behind them echoed with confusion, smoke, and the cries of shocked bystanders. Sam Bass had escaped death, for now. Under cover of night, Jackson took Bass into the nearby woods. He laid his mentor beneath a twisted oak, propped his head with a rolled coat, and did what he could to stop the bleeding, but it was hopeless. The bullets had torn through too much. Bass's body was breaking down, and still Sam Bass refused to surrender. With blood on his lips and fading vision, he told Jackson to leave him behind. "No, Frank," he whispered. "This is where I stop. You go on." Jackson didn't want to leave, but the Rangers would be coming. Bass knew that. He instructed his friend to tie up his horse nearby in case he regained strength, but in his heart he knew he wouldn't. Jackson fled into the night. Bass, wounded, alone, betrayed, laid quietly beneath the stars, waiting. The next morning, locals found him, barely conscious, soaked in sweat and blood. He was taken back to Round Rock, placed under guard, and given what little medical attention could be provided. His condition continued to deteriorate. Word of his capture spread like wildfire. Rangers and reporters gathered at his bedside. Among them was General John B. Jones, the man who had led the charge against him. He knelt beside the dying outlaw and asked the question every lawman was desperate to know. Who were the others? Where is Frank Jackson? Where is the rest of your gang? And Sam Bass, barely able to speak, managed to answer, I'll never tell. 3 days after the ambush, on July 21st, 1878, Sam Bass died. His last words, some say, were of his mother. Others claim he died silently. But everyone agrees on this. He never betrayed the names of his friends. Not even the man who saved him. Not even Jim Murphy. He was buried in Old Round Rock Cemetery, under a simple stone in the same town where he had tried to write one final chapter. Jim Murphy, the traitor, lived out his remaining years in obscurity, haunted by whispers and cursed in taverns across Texas. His name was forever stained. And Sam Bass, he became immortal, to some a cold-blooded killer, to others a Robin Hood of the railways. But to history he is the outlaw who refused to kneel, who faced down the might of the law with grit in his teeth, and who took his secrets to the grave. In every outlaw tale, there's a moment where the smoke clears and history holds its breath. For Sam Bass, that moment came not with a drawn gun, but with a desperate act of friendship. Frank Jackson's heroic escape under fire, a final, thunderous charge to preserve a dying legend. The chaos of Round Rock was still unfolding. Bullets had torn through the air like locusts, striking Sheriff Grimes down and mortally wounding Sam Bass. Townsfolk screamed, shopkeepers ducked, lawmen scrambled. Amidst it all, with bodies falling and the air thick with smoke and heat, Frank Jackson did the unthinkable. He turned back. Bass, writhing on the dirt with blood pouring from his chest and lower back, was trying to crawl, still reaching for a weapon, still refusing to give up. Jackson, just a young man barely seasoned by outlaw life, made a split-second decision. Where others would run, he charged. With a pistol blazing in one hand, he sprinted to Bass, cutting through gunfire like a man possessed. He grabbed the dying outlaw by the collar, lifted him into the saddle with brute strength and leapt behind him. His left arm gripped Bass tightly. His right hand fired at anything that moved, and then the horse took off. They galloped down the main street of Round Rock, two ghosts breaking free from the jaws of death, with lawmen shouting and rifles cracking behind them. But the townsfolk would never forget what they saw, a lone rider defying the entire weight of Texas justice for a friend already halfway gone. As night fell, the two fugitives disappeared into the surrounding woods, swallowed by the black embrace of the Texas wild. But the ride was more than heroic. It was tragic, because deep down they both knew something that neither dared say aloud. Sam Bass wasn't going to make it. They reached a wooded ravine, far from roads and railways. Frank laid Bass down under the cover of an oak, where moonlight pierced through in narrow blades. Bass, gasping, bleeding, broken, looked up at his closest friend. The pain was overwhelming. His face was pale. His body convulsed with each breath, but his voice somehow remained steady. "No, Frank," he murmured. "This is where I stop." Jackson protested. He refused to leave. But Bass, ever the leader, even now knew what had to be done. "I can't ride anymore," he said. "But you can. Don't let them take both of us. Tie the horse nearby. If I'm lucky, I'll walk out. But if not, let me die in peace." With trembling hands, Jackson did as he was told. He left the horse close. He gripped Sam's hand. Then, with a heavy heart and tears no one ever saw, he vanished into the woods, becoming a phantom just like the legend he rode with. Bass was alone. Just the moon, the trees, the pain, and the end. For 3 days, Sam Bass refused to die. He clawed at life with the same tenacity he had shown when robbing trains, outrunning rangers, and escaping death again and again. He tore pieces of his own shirt to clean the wounds. He tried to drink rainwater from leaves, but his body was giving in. The gold was gone. The glory, fading. On July 20th, 1878, local ranchers found him. They didn't know who he was at first. He looked like any other drifter who had lost a fight with the wild. But when they recognized the revolver on his hip, the blood-stained hat, and the infamous outlaw face described in every newspaper from Nebraska to New Orleans, they realized they were looking at Sam Bass himself. He was brought back to Round Rock, placed under guard in a crude holding room, and given medical attention, but it was clear from the moment he arrived he was dying. The next morning, Major John B. Jones, the man who had hunted him for months, arrived. He looked down at the outlaw who had eluded justice so many times, who had become a symbol of defiance. Jones knelt. Calmly but firmly, he asked the question on every lawman's mind. Who helped you? Who's still out there? Bass opened his eyes. His lips cracked into a faint, blood-stained smile. I can't tell you that, he said. And that was it. The great outlaw, the train robber, the fearless rider who had once stolen $60,000 in gold with a pickaxe and a dream, took his secrets to the grave. On July 21st, 1878, just days after the ambush, Sam Bass died, a single outlaw who had become a symbol of frontier rebellion. No final scream, no dramatic confession, just silence, and then legend. They buried him in Old Round Rock Cemetery, under a modest headstone. No parade, no salute, just a sister who traveled to the town to erect a simple memorial for her brother. It read only, "A brave man reposes in death here." And with that, a myth was born. In the years that followed, the name Sam Bass would echo through the canyons of Texas, down into every saloon ballad and outlaw tale told around smoky campfires. His loyalty became the stuff of legend, never betraying his crew, not even under the shadow of death. His boldness unmatched, robbing railways in broad daylight, charming townsfolk while outsmarting lawmen. His infamy unparalleled, his story becoming as much American folklore as any dime novel hero or villain. Hollywood would eventually find him. Songs would be written. His grave would become a place of curiosity, where visitors still come to this day, placing coins, bullets, and bandanas in quiet tribute. And Frank Jackson. He disappeared completely. Some say he escaped to Mexico. Others claim he returned years later under a different name. But no one really knows, and that only adds to the legend, because that's what Sam Bass became. Not a man, but a legend. In a world of shifting lines between right and wrong, law and lawlessness, Bass carved his name with a 44 and a restless heart. And though his reign was brief, the echo of hooves, gunshots, and gold coins scattered across the tracks of America still ring with his name. So if you ever find yourself in Texas, standing at the quiet grave of Sam Bass, remember this. He was no hero. He was no monster. He was something far more dangerous. A man free enough to choose his own fate, and wild enough to live it.